Hi there, and welcome to part 2 of Easy-Peasy X3D. This is your buddy Dave over at Mars X3D. And we learned a lot in part 1. And if you didn't look at part 1, part 2 is not going to work for you. You need to do it one at a time. And what we're going to talk about in part 2 is a deck of cards, just like this one here. And what you're basically doing when you're adjusting with the clone brush is you're slicing the image you're looking at into maybe 52 different layers or depth planes. That's the z-axis, and we're going to talk about that in just a bit. Some of you will want to learn even more about the clone brush technique, and so you'll want to look at this book, which you can order on Amazon. It's an ebook or a hard copy. I have nothing to do with it, but it's a really good book, and it does teach you a couple different methods for doing the clone brush technique. Now, I myself prefer depth mapping to anything else today, but that's a good deal more complex, and it's outside the scope of this tutorial. Anyway, let's go ahead, dive in, and get to work. So let's start out with an 8th grade math review. Now we're going to be viewing this in X3D. Are you ready? Here we go. And you'll remember that you had an x-axis, a y-axis, which was vertical, and then a z-axis, which is your third dimension, the one of depth. And that's the one we're going to be concentrating on today. It's the one that gives you 3D. So before we get started, just a quick note that we have sized our image to 7.77 inches at 300 dpi. When the stereo window has been set, you'll set your clone brush by holding Control N, and you'll find that 75 and 30 pixels are two convenient brush sizes to use. But again, use whatever you're comfortable with. And when you use the clone brush, you hold down Shift, hold down your left mouse key, and you drag. A small circle will appear. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, let's start the process. Your right arrow moves things back in X3D. Your left arrow brings things forward. So let's take that triangular piece in the background, the purple one, and I'm going to set this way back at 52. I'm holding Shift, holding it down, holding my left mouse, and you see the circle appear. And I'm just going to quick and dirty kind of slop that in there. And there you can see that we moved that back considerably. Now all I have to do is hit Z to undo it. Boom. And there it is. So let's play with this a little bit. Let's start out by backing off 4, as you can see down at the bottom, and we'll use our clone brush. And I'm just going to do all this very quick and dirty and sloppy. This is not intended to be a finished product or to impress anybody, but it's intended to show you how this works. Okay, so there's one, the square is the closest. Maybe the ball is the next closest, so I'm going to hit it back, right arrow to 8 pixels. I'm going to go around to do that. And the cone is next. Let's go back to 12 pixels. You're seeing the brush. Sloppy, dirty. And now that green rectangle is back a little way, so I'm going to go 8 pixels back to 20. And that's actually just about where it is in the original 3D. And let's go back 4 more to 24. You can keep track of all of your planes either mentally or write them down if you need to. You'll get used to doing it. And let's go back 1, 2, 3 to 36 for the purple triangle, and that also is just about where it appears in the original 3D renting. Okay, I made a little overrun there, but now let's come back to 0. Remember, always come back to 0. Okay, and you can see very sloppily, but we've assigned different planes to those figures. Now I'm going to hit Z and bring it all back. That's how it was. And bring it back to 0, of course. And we're back to where we were. So let's do it a little more radically this time, and maybe a little more difficult, not difficult, but a little more attention to detail. There are different schools of thought as to whether to start in the background and work forward, or start in the foreground and work backwards. Well, each picture is different, and you're going to find a way that makes sense to you. But for today's demonstration, let's take it way back to 52, okay, which we started with in the original there. And let's do the purple triangle, the tetrahedron. Okay, and there it is. And now the next furthest, closest one rather, is come forward 4, left arrow to 48, and go back and do our rectangle. And bearing in mind that there's nothing, not doing any subtle stuff here in terms of gradients or slanting, anything like that. So the next one is a cylinder. Let's come forward 2 on that to 40. You can see it's pushing it back, pushing it back. Hopefully you're watching this in X3D, of course. Okay, and let's come forward 2 to 32. The cone, and another 2 for the ball. I'm going to go around and catch all those little what they call fish scales. And let's come forward another 1, 2, 3, 4 for the cube. Put that way out front here. And again, not perfect by any means, not meant to be. But now let's bring it back to 0. And now you can see that we have moved those objects around in the Z-axis. So let me hit Z and bring everything back. Okay, but let me explain why we're doing this. You see, whatever we're trying to fix in whatever image you're working on, it will exist on one plane or another. One of 50 or 100, maybe 150 planes, who knows? But it depends on the image. The point is, you might have to hunt around a little bit to fix something that needs to be moved into a different plane. But using the clone brush and hitting Z when you don't quite get it, until you zero in on it, well, that's the secret. Using the 4-click, one arrow is 4, or the shift arrow, which is 1, you can zero right in on any plane in any 3D image. So let's try a little experiment. We're looking at this in X3D, and it's really a pretty good picture. There's not a whole lot that needs fixing in here, but let's play with it just a little bit. You see this little part here sticking out in front of the stone? Let's make that pop out just a bit more so it looks just a bit more realistic. So I'm going to just guess, I'm going to hit, there's 20, let's see, I've got a 30 brush, and you can see, looking at X3D, I'm not back far enough. I hit Z, I'm going to come back again. Now I'm back too far. So I come up 4, And let's see. Okay, that was about where it needed to be at 40. So let's bring it up. Try 2 pixels, shift, arrow left, and we bring it forward to 38. And we go in here, shift, control, and let's just paint that a little bit and back off. Well, you know what? That's almost a little too much, isn't it? I'm going to hit Z, boom, it's gone, and I'm going to back off 1 pixel. So I'm going to hit shift and right arrow and back off 1 pixel. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do it again. And that's just about right. That gives us some separation from the main block. It's more realistic than it was before in the sense of what your eye might actually see. Now, of course, we're going to bring, looking in the left-hand corner, we're going to bring it back to 0, 0. And there's our picture with that little modification in it. So here's the next thing we're going to do, wrapping things up today, is we're going to save this as a universal LRL. You see where I'm at in the menu? I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put LRL. There we go. And we're going to go into fast tone, and there it is. Now, LRL normally would have these 2 images here would be parallel. These 2 images here would be X3D. Well, we did it in X3D, so it's these images that are in X3D, and they're the ones we're interested in. So I'm going to crop it. I'm going to go in here and going to take out that one on the end. Going to save it. Going to overwrite. Yes. And there's our X3D LRL. The reason I do that is to provide this nice little fusion dot up in the middle. It makes it easier for people sometimes to fuse the images when you have a fusion dot. So let me cover what we've gone over in this tutorial, and we'll be ready for tutorial number 3. Okay, so let's take a quick look at what we went through in part 2. We talked briefly about sizing your images in preparation for clone brushing, 7.77 inches, 300 dpi, using whichever program you like. Then we also talked about visualizing the deck of cards, those slices that go down through the Z-axis of your stereo image. And we did talk about the key points to the clone brush technique, using the shift and arrow keys and sizing your brush. We also had a look at making things pop. We made a tiny adjustment in the image that we worked on in the first tutorial and ended up with something that, in my opinion, looks better than the original. And we talked about saving and cropping your LRL in preparation for stereo compositing. So that's it for this edition of EASY-PEASY X3D Part 2. Yeah, Part 2. Part 3 coming up. We'll see you then.